Just one night, a woman let a rich man stay in Alaska, but set one rule he didn't expect. The wind had been howling for hours, the kind that did not sound like weather but like something alive, circling the cabin and testing every seam. Snow slammed sideways into the trees, erasing the narrow road until it became nothing but white movement and shadow. In Alaska, nights like this were not dramatic. They were ordinary, and ordinary was what made them dangerous. Lena Harper was halfway through rinsing a chipped ceramic mug when she heard the knock. It was not loud. It was not urgent. 3 slow taps. Wood on wood. She froze, listening. The wind swallowed everything, then paused, just long enough for her to hear it again. 3 taps. Careful. Almost polite. No one knocked on doors out here at night. Lena did not rush. She dried her hands, set the mug upside down, and picked up the heavy flashlight from the counter. The cabin was small, clean, and spare. Everything had a place. Everything was quiet. The fire in the stove snapped once, then settled. She opened the door only as wide as the chain allowed. A man stood on the porch, snow crusted along the shoulders of his coat. His hair was dark, dusted white. His face was calm in a way that did not belong to the situation, but his hands betrayed him. They shook, not from fear, from cold. Just one night, he said. His voice was steady, controlled, but thin. The kind of voice people used when they had already calculated how little they could ask for and still survive. Lena scanned him the way people did when they lived far from help. Boots worn but clean. No visible weapon. No pack. No phone in his hands. He did not step forward. He did not lean on the doorframe. He stood where he was, waiting. You are cutting it close, she said. I know. There was no apology in his tone. Just acknowledgement. She opened the door. Warm air spilled out, fogging the cold. The man exhaled slowly, like someone who had been holding his breath for miles. Inside, Lena gestured once toward the stove. Sit, she said. He did, carefully, removing his boots without being asked. He folded them neatly against the wall, as if this mattered. As if he mattered. Lena noticed that too. She poured hot water over ginger and dried roots, set the mug in front of him, and watched his hands wrap around it. They were strong hands, scarred in small, precise ways. Not the hands of a drifter. Not the hands of someone and used to control. You alone? She asked. Yes. He did not say it defensively. He did not add anything. Lena respected that. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the windows hard enough to make the glass sing. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then went quiet. You can stay, she said. His eyes lifted to hers. Dark, focused, not hopeful, just attentive. One night, she continued. That is it. He nodded. There is one rule. She waited until she had his full attention before finishing. You never enter my bedroom, Lena said. Not for any reason. Not even in an emergency. The man paused. Only for a second. Long enough for her to know the rule surprised him. Understood, he said. No argument. No ismail. No attempt to soften the moment. Lena turned away, satisfied, and set an extra blanket on the couch. She did not ask his name. He did not offer it. The fire crackled low and steady between them, throwing warm light against the walls, against the simple shelves lined with books and tools, and nothing unnecessary. As the storm pressed closer, the cabin held. Neither of them knew yet that the rule she had just set would be tested. Neither of them knew who the other really was. But in that moment, with the world reduced to snow and wood and heat, one thing was already clear. He was a rich man who had chosen to disappear, and she was a woman who would not let anyone cross her line. Morning arrived without ceremony. There was no sunrise the way people imagined it. No golden reveal. Just a slow thinning of the dark, the gray light pressing gently against the cabin windows as if asking permission to come in. The storm had moved on some time before dawn, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt deliberate. Daniel Frost woke on the couch with a blanket still folded neatly over him. He had slept lightly, waking every hour, not because of fear, but because his body was not used to this kind of quiet. In cities, silence was artificial. Here was earned. He sat up slowly, careful not to make noise. The fire in the stove had burned down to embers, still warm. He added 2 pieces of split wood he had stacked by the hearth the night before, feeding the flame with measured movements. The stove responded with a low crackle, then steadied. Outside, the world was white. Snow covered everything evenly, smoothing edges, erasing tracks. Trees stood heavy and still, branches bowed. A narrow line of footprints led from the porch to the tree lean and back. Lena's, he assumed. Practical. Even in a storm, she moved when she needed to. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee beans and clean wood. Daniel found a hand grinder on the counter and paused. He did not assume. He waited. When Lena emerged from the small side room she used as storage, hair tied back, sweater thick and neutral, he met her eyes. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the grinder. She nodded once. The sound of grinding filled the room, slow and rhythmic. Not rushed. The kind of sound that told time differently. Daniel measured water, poured carefully, and set 2 mugs on the table without comment. Lena watched him from the corner of her eye. She did not smile. She did not hover. She simply observed. People out here learn more by watching than by asking. The dog appeared then, padding in from the porch, thick-coated and alert, tail swaying once before settling. He sniffed Daniel's hand, decided, and lay down near the stove. "He likes you," Lena said. "I'm trying to be useful," Daniel replied. She accepted that answer. The day unfolded in small tasks. Lena showed him where to stack wood so it stayed dry, how to knock snow from boots without bringing it inside, how to latch the door so the wind could not force it open. Daniel listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer alternatives. They ate simply. Eggs, bread toasted on the stove, soup reheated slowly. No one spoke much. There was no need to fill space. The cabin itself seemed to prefer restraint. Outside, Daniel shoveled the path, moving with deliberate efficiency. His coat was plain, his gloves worn but clean. Nothing about him announced wealth. Nothing needed to. Power, when real, stayed quiet. Lena worked nearby, checking traps, marking notes in a small notebook, her handwriting tight and precise. She did not ask where Daniel had learned to move the way he did. He did not explain. Healing, Daniel realized, did not announce itself. It arrived through repetition, through warmth earned after cold, through tasks that required attention but not performance. At midday, Lena returned from the tree lean with frost clinging to her scarf. "Storms change things," she said. "Paths shift. You learn to look again." Daniel nodded. He understood that language. In the afternoon, they sat by the window as light faded early, the lamp casting a soft yellow circle around them. Daniel opened one of the hardback books on the shelf. Essays. Old. Margins worn. He read without hurry. Lena mended a torn glove, needle flashing briefly in the light. The dog slept. The cabin held. There were moments when Daniel felt the impulse to speak, to explain who he was, to offer context, credentials, reassurance. Each time, he let the impulse pass. Out here, words weighed more. Lena had not asked. That mattered. As night returned, colder than before, the wind picked up again, gentler now, testing but not threatening. Daniel stepped outside once more to secure the woodpile, breath turning white, the vastness pressing close. Inside, Lena locked the door, then checked it again. Habit. Survival written into muscle memory. She glanced toward her bedroom door, closed, solid. The rule remained unspoken, intact. Daniel did not look at it. Dinner was quiet. Afterward, Daniel washed the dishes, dried them, and returned them to their place exactly as he had found them. Lena noticed. She always noticed. When the fire burned low, Daniel sat back on the couch, hands resting loosely on his knees. He did not take out a phone. He did not check the time. The mechanical watch on his wrist ticked softly, almost imperceptible. Lena poured tea and set it beside him. "Storm might come back," she said. "If it does," Daniel replied, "I will be here." Not as a promise, as a statement of fact. Outside, the snow began again, slow and steady. Cold pressed in. Inside, the light held. And in the quiet, something in Daniel eased. Not because it was fixed, not because it was understood, but because for the first time in a long while, Nothing was asking him to be more than what he was in that moment. By the third morning, Daniel Frost had stopped, waking up in fragments. Sleep came in longer stretches now, still light, still aware but no longer guarded. His body learned the cabin the way it learned any new environment, by testing it, then trusting it. He woke before the light again, not because he had to, but because his rhythm had always leaned that way. He rose without sound. The couch creaked once under his weight. He waited until it settled, then moved. He dressed in layers he had folded the night before, neutral colors, functional, nothing that needed attention. Outside, the temperature hovered near 10 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to punish mistakes, cold enough to reward preparation. Daniel opened the door and stepped into the morning. The air cut clean and sharp, filling his lungs, clearing thought. Snow crunched under his boots with a precise, honest sound. He stood still for a moment, scanning the treeline, not from fear but from habit. Awareness had always been his first discipline. He shoveled the path again, even though it was not fully buried. Not because it was necessary, but because consistency mattered. Each stroke was measured. No wasted motion. He worked until his breathing deepened, until heat built beneath the layers, then stopped. Discipline was knowing when to stop. Inside, he split wood. Outside, the dog followed him, quiet and watchful. Daniel did not speak to the animal, but he acknowledged him with a nod. The dog understood this language. Lena woke to the sound of the grinder. She paused in the doorway, watching without announcing herself. Daniel stood at the counter, turning the handle at a steady pace, eyes down, focused. There was no hurry in him, no drift. "You do not miss a step," she said. "I prefer not to," Daniel replied. It was not a defense. It was a fact. They ate in silence again. Eggs, oatmeal, coffee. Daniel washed the dishes immediately after, drying them, placing them back exactly where they belonged. He noticed how Lena kept the cabin. Clean, but not obsessive. Functional, but warm. Nothing wasted. Nothing excessive. The rest of the day followed a pattern. Daniel repaired what the storm had loosened. A hinge, a latch, a section of the porch railing that had begun to pull away. He worked with the tools as if they were familiar extensions of his hands. Lena offered him what he needed without asking how he knew. Healing, Daniel discovered, came through capacity used quietly, through doing what needed to be done without waiting to be asked, through restraint. At midday, Lena left for the trail. Daniel did not follow. He stayed, maintaining the fire, checking supplies, preparing for night. He kept a small notebook in his pocket, blank pages, no markings. He did not write in it. Not yet. For now, he observed. When Lena returned, cheeks flushed from cold, she set her pack down and poured water into the kettle. "You can go into town tomorrow," she said. "Weather looks stable." Daniel considered this. He had not thought beyond the cabin. That itself was new. "I will stay," he said. She glanced at him, measuring. Not surprised, just noting. The afternoon passed with the same quiet intention. Daniel read, not to escape, but to anchor. He stretched lightly, keeping his body ready, disciplined. He repaired a tear in his glove instead of replacing it. He chose maintenance over replacement. The choice said more than he intended. As night approached, the wind returned, lighter now, more curious than violent. Daniel secured the doors, checked the windows, and returned the flashlight to its place. He did not test boundaries. He did not glance toward the closed bedroom door. Some lines were not meant to be approached. Dinner was soup again. Simple. Enough. Afterward, Daniel sat by the fire, hands resting open, eyes following the flame. He did not reach for distraction. He did not need it. His mind, once crowded with decisions measured in millions and seconds, now held space. Lena watched him from across the room, sewing kit in her lap. She did not ask what he had left behind. She did not ask what he intended to do next. She understood something essential. Pressure broke things that patience repaired. The dog shifted closer to Daniel, leaning against his leg. Daniel rested a hand on his back, grounding himself in the warmth. Outside, the temperature dropped further. Inside, the fire held steady. Daniel felt the quiet settle not as absence, but as structure, a framework strong enough to hold what he had not yet named. He was not healed. He was not fixed. But he was present. And for a man who had spent years ahead of himself, that presence was the beginning of something durable. Lena Harper did not enter Daniel Frost's life all at once. She entered the way Alaska did, quietly, without announcement, without demand. On the fourth day, the routine shifted just enough for Daniel to notice. It happened in the afternoon, when the light thinned early and the air took on that familiar edge that meant the temperature was sliding again. Daniel had just finished stacking split wood along the outer wall, aligning each piece so it would dry evenly. He stepped back, checked the line, and adjusted one log by half an inch. Precision mattered, even here. Lena came up the path from the tree lean, snow dusting the shoulders of her coat. She moved with the ease of someone who knew exactly where the ground dipped and where it held. There was no rush in her pace, no wasted motion. The dog met her halfway, tail low and steady, then turned back toward Daniel, as if including him without question. "You do not need to fix that," Lena said, nodding toward the stack. "I know," Daniel replied. "It needed fixing anyway." She accepted that without comment. Inside the cabin, she hung her coat, shook the snow from her boots, and placed her gloves on the shelf to dry. Everything she did suggested familiarity with boundaries. She did not move his things. She did not ask where he had been. She did not fill the air with questions that would require him to explain himself. Instead, she poured water into the kettle and set it on the stove. "Tea?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel said. She chose the blend without asking his preference. Not because she assumed, but because she paid attention. He had not added sugar to his coffee. He had not reached for the honey. She noticed what he did not choose as much as what he did. They sat at the small table, steam rising between them. Outside, the wind brushed the cabin, testing, then moved on. "You can use the trail tomorrow," Lena said. The snow settled enough. Daniel nodded. He did not ask where it led. Silence followed. Not the awkward kind. The useful kind. The kind that let each person remain intact. Lena reached into the drawer and took out a folded map, old and creased from use. She placed it on the table, flattening it with her palm. "If you go past the bend," she said, pointing with her finger, "you will see fresh tracks. Moose. Sometimes. Do not follow them." "I will not," Daniel said. She looked up, meeting his eyes for a moment. There was no challenge there, just confirmation. She folded the map and returned it to the drawer. No explanation of why the moose were dangerous. No story attached. She trusted him to understand the weight of the instruction. That was the first sign. Later, as the light faded, Lena prepared dinner. Simple again. Stew simmered low, filling the cabin with warmth. Daniel chopped vegetables at the counter, knife steady, movements economical. Lena did not correct his technique. She did not hover. She let it be competent. When the stew was ready, she ladled it into bowls and set one in front of him. "Careful," she said. Hot. Not because she thought he needed the warning. Because safety, to her, was a habit. They ate slowly. At one point, the wind rattled the window hard enough to make the glass tremble. Daniel glanced up, instinctive. Lena did not flinch. She reached over and adjusted the latch, testing it once, then returned to her seat. "It holds," she said. Daniel nodded. After dinner, Lena stood and cleared the table. Daniel rose to help, but she shook her head once. "I have it," she said. He stopped. That was the second sign. Later, as the fire burned low, Lena sat on the floor near the hearth, mending a tear in a thick blanket. Daniel watched from the chair, hands folded loosely, posture relaxed but alert. The dog slept between them, breathing slow and even. "You do not ask many questions," Daniel said eventually. Lena did not look up. "Neither do you." "I'm not used to that," he admitted. She tied off the thread and trimmed it clean. "Out here, people ask questions when they want something." Daniel considered that. "What do you want?" he asked. Lena met his gaze then, steady and unguarded. "To know who was in my cabin," she said. "And I already do." She did not mean his name, or his past. She meant his behavior. That was the third sign. The bedroom door remained closed. Solid. Untouched. Daniel did not approach it. He did not need to be reminded of the rule. Lena noticed that too. Before turning in for the night, she placed a lantern near the couch where Daniel slept. In case the power cuts, she said. It was a small thing. Practical. Quiet. But it told him everything he needed to know about how she defined care. Not intrusive. Not performative. Just present. As Daniel lay back under the blanket, listening to the fire and the wind beyond the walls, he realized something had shifted again. Not dramatically. Not in a way that demanded attention. But the space felt different. Lena did not try to fix him. She did not ask him to open up. She did not ask him to prove anything. She simply created conditions where nothing was taken from him. And for a man who had spent years being measured, assessed, leveraged, and watched, that absence of demand was the safest thing he had felt in a very long time. If this story resonates with you, if you recognize the quiet relief of being allowed to just exist without explanation, then you already understand why moments like this matter more than grand gestures ever could. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, the light held. The first real interaction happened without planning. It was late morning, the kind Alaska reserved for brief clarity. The sky had opened just enough to show pale blue between drifting clouds, and the temperature hovered around 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold, but workable. Daniel Frost pulled on his gloves and stepped outside to clear fresh snow from a porch. Lena was already there. She stood near the railing, checking a length of rope she used to secure gear during storms. Her movements were methodical, practiced. She did not look up immediately when Daniel joined her, and he did not announce himself. They worked side by side for several minutes without speaking, breath turning white in the air. At some point, Lena handed him the other end of the rope. "Hold this," she said. Daniel took it, adjusting the tension without being told how tight it needed to be. She noticed. He noticed that she noticed. Neither of them commented. When knot was finished, Lena tested it once, firm, then let go. "That will last," she said. "It should," Daniel replied. They went back inside together. The dog followed, tail brushing the doorframe, then settled near the stove. Lena set water on to heat. Daniel removed his gloves and placed them on the drying rack exactly where there was space, not crowding hers. The cabin felt fuller with both of them moving in it, but not crowded. Lena reached for the hand grinder and paused. "You want to do it?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "You go ahead." She nodded, turning the handle slowly. The sound filled the room again, familiar now. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching the snow drift past the window. He did not check the time. He did not think ahead. When the coffee was ready, Lena poured 2 mugs and slid one toward him across the table. "Careful," she said again. "Hot." He smiled just slightly, not because the moment was amusing, but because it was consistent. They sat. For the first time since he had arrived, Daniel spoke without being prompted. "This place," he said, gesturing lightly with the mug, "does not rush you." Lena considered that. "It will," she said, "if you let it." He nodded. "I am learning not to." That was it. No elaboración. No story attached. Outside, the wind shifted. Inside, the fire held steady. After breakfast, Lena pulled on her coat and reached for her pack. "I'm checking the trail," she said. "You can come if you want." Daniel did not answer immediately. He weighed the invitation, not as a test, but as a choice. "I will," he said. They walked together, leaving the cabin behind. The snow was deep in places, compacted in others. Lena moved ahead, setting the pace without announcing it. Daniel matched her stride easily, careful not to step too close, careful not to lag. The forest closed around them, sound dampened, the world reduced to breath and crunch and movement. A husky barked somewhere in the distance, then quieted. At a bend in the trail, Lena stopped. "Fresh tracks," she said, pointing with her chin. Daniel looked, reading the pattern. "Large. Recent." "We turn back," he said. Lena glanced at him, a flicker of approval crossing her face. "Yes." They turned. On the way back, Daniel slipped once on a patch of ice. He caught himself quickly, steadying with one hand against a tree. Lena stopped, watching him without alarm. "You all right?" she asked. "Yes," he said. She waited a beat longer, then continued walking. That was the warmth. Not concern that lingered too long. Not distance that dismissed. Just attention applied and released at the right moment. Back at the cabin, Lena shrugged off her coat and hung it up. Daniel followed suit, then reached for the kettle without being asked. He filled it, set it on the stove, and waited for the heat. Lena watched him from across the room. "You do not take up much space," she said. Daniel looked at her, surprised. "Is that a problem?" "No," she replied. "It is rare." He accepted that without comment. The afternoon passed quietly. Daniel repaired a loose board on the porch. Lena organized supplies. At one point, they worked at opposite ends of the room, the silence between them companionable, not charged. As evening approached, Lena began preparing dinner. Daniel joined her, chopping vegetables, moving with ease. Their hands did not touch. They did not need to. "Thank you," Lena said when he finished. "For what?" Daniel asked. "For not asking," she replied. He understood. Dinner was simple again. Soup, bread, enough. Afterward, they sat by the fire. The dog lay between them, warm and solid. The wind picked up outside, testing the cabin lightly. Daniel felt something settle into place. Not attraction, not curiosity, something steadier. Trust beginning at the edges. They did not name it. They did not have to. In Alaska, first contact was not about words. It was about rhythm, about learning when to step forward and when to leave space untouched. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel realized he was not alone in that understanding. The shift began before either of them named it. Daniel Frost rose early again, but this time he did not step outside immediately. He stood in the quiet of the cabin, listening to the low pop of the stove as it warmed, to the even breathing of the dog asleep near the hearth, to the steady rhythm of a place that did not care who he had been before he arrived. Lena came out of the storage room, carrying a box of supplies, heavier than it looked. Daniel crossed the room, without comment, and took the weight from her hands. She did not protest. "Thank you," she said, already reaching for the door. Outside, the air was sharp and clear. Overnight, the temperature had dropped to just under 5 degrees Fahrenheit. The sky was bright but brittle, the kind that promised cold without mercy. Lena headed toward the shed at the edge of the clearing. Daniel followed. Inside the shed, tools hung in precise rows. Fuel cans were stacked, labeled, measured. This was not improvisation. This was a system built by someone who expected to rely on it. "I need the generator checked," Lena said. "Storm last night put strain on it." Daniel nodded and knelt without being asked. He removed his gloves carefully, laying them flat on a dry surface, and examined the unit with practiced efficiency. He did not frown. He did not hurry. He worked as if he had done this many times before, not because he had to, but because competence was something he carried with him. Lena watched from the doorway. "You do not have to," she said. Daniel did not look up. "I know. That was the moment." He worked for the next 2 hours. He replaced a worn belt, tightened a loose fitting, cleaned residue that would have caused problems later. He did not speak while he worked. He did not ask for permission. He did not ask for anything. Lena brought him water once, setting it down within reach, then stepped back. She did not hover. She did not thank him again. When he finished, Daniel wiped his hands on a rag and stood. "It will hold," he said. Lena nodded. "Good. No pras. No curiosity." That was not the reaction he expected. Later that day, Daniel noticed the roofline above the porch sagging slightly under the weight of fresh snow. He grabbed the ladder before Lena could say anything and climbed, moving with care, testing each rung. He cleared snow, adjusted the brace, secured a weak joint. He came down slowly. Lena was waiting. "You do not need to fix everything," she said. Daniel met her gaze. He did not explain. He did not defend himself. "I am not," he replied. She studied him for a long moment, then turned away. Inside, Lena prepared lunch while Daniel stacked firewood. He measured each piece, aligning them by size, ensuring airflow. He worked until the stack was perfect, then stopped. The afternoon passed this way. Daniel checked the radio. He cleaned the chimney vent. He sharpened a blade that did not strictly need sharpening. Each task was done fully, then released. There was no accumulation, no keeping score. Lena noticed all of it. She said nothing. That was the twist. By evening, Daniel realized something had shifted. He was not helping. He was not contributing in the way. People expected favors to be offered and returned. He was simply working, and Lena was not responding with gratitude, suspicion, or attachment. She was responding with neutrality. At dinner, she placed his bowl on the table without ceremony. "You eat like someone who does not rush," she said. Daniel paused. "So do you?" She nodded once. After dinner, Daniel washed the dishes as usual. Lena dried them and returned them to their places. They moved around each other without touching, without friction. The cabin absorbed their rhythm. Later, as the fire burned low, Lena spoke again. "You could take tomorrow off," she said. Daniel looked at her. "From what?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "From proving something." Daniel felt the words land, not as accusation, but as observation. "I'm not proving anything," he said. "I know," Lena replied. That was the second turn. The wind rose outside, rattling the trees. Inside, the lantern cast soft light against the walls. The bedroom door remained closed. The rule remained intact. Daniel sat back, hands resting loosely, and for the first time since he arrived, he felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with his past. Lena was not impressed by his capacity. She was not threatened by it either. She was simply noting it, the way one notes weather patterns or the behavior of animals. Useful information. Nothing more. The next morning, Daniel woke to find Lena already gone. A note sat on the table, written in careful block letters. "Trail. Back before dark." Daniel read it once and set it down. He stepped outside and took in the clearing, the cabin, the shed, the quiet. For the first time, he did not reach for a task immediately. He stood still, letting the cold bite, letting the silence press in. He realized then what had unsettled him. In every other place he had lived, effort invited interpretation. Work invited assumption. People filled the gaps with stories about motive, status, leverage. Here, none of that applied. Lena had not asked why he worked when he did not need to. She had not asked what he was compensating for. She had not thanked him the way people thanked favors that came with strings. She had treated his effort as choice. That made it heavier. When Lena returned at dusk, cheeks flushed from cold, she found Daniel sitting on the porch. Steps, hands resting on his knees, watching the last light fade. "You did not go anywhere," she said. "No," Daniel replied. She nodded, as if that confirmed something. Inside, she poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to him. "You can stay," she said. Daniel looked up. "I know," he said. "That is not what I meant," Lena replied. She did not explain. She did not need to. The shift had already happened. Not because Daniel had worked harder. Not because he had proven his worth. But because for the first time, someone had seen his capacity and chosen not to be moved by it. And that left a question neither of them was ready to answer. If his power did not define him here, then what would? The silence after the shift did not feel empty. It felt charged. Daniel Frost noticed it first in the way Lena moved through the cabin the next morning. Nothing overt had changed. She still rose early. She still brewed coffee slowly, measured water by habit, checked the latch on the door before turning away. But there was a new precision in her distance, a careful calibration that had not been there before. She did not avoid him. She did not invite him closer. She simply held the space between them intact. Daniel respected that space the way he respected weather. He did not try to push through it. He adjusted to it. They worked in parallel again that day, not together. Lena organized supplies near the shelves. Daniel sorted gear near the door. Their movements did not intersect. Their glances did. Once, when Daniel looked up, he found Lena watching him. Not openly, not with curiosity, with assessment. When their eyes met, she did not look away immediately. She held the contact for a beat longer than necessary, then returned to her task. Daniel felt something tighten, then settle. This was not tension that demanded action. It was tension that asked for restraint. Outside, the temperature hovered near 20 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to keep breath visible, warm enough to allow stillness. Daniel stepped onto the porch to split wood, each strike clean and measured. He paused between swings, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow, intentional. If you're listening to this now, if your shoulders feel tight without knowing why, try that. Inhale slowly. Let the air fill your chest. Exhale without forcing it. Let your body remember what steady feels like. Inside, Lena heard the axe strike wood, then stop. Strike again. Stop. She matched her movements to the sound without thinking. Reach. Place. Align. The cabin absorbed the cadence. At midday, they ate separately, not as a decision, as an instinct. Daniel finished first and cleaned his bowl, drying it carefully, setting it back where it belonged. Lena watched from the stove, saying nothing. Later, she spoke. You do not like being observed, she said. Daniel considered the statement. I am accustomed to it, he replied. That is not the same thing. She nodded, accepting the distinction. I am not observing you, Lena said. I am noticing. Daniel met her eyes. There was no accusation in her voice. No demand for response. That is different, he said. Yes, she replied. The silence returned, deeper now. In the afternoon, Lena left for the trail again. Daniel stayed behind. Not because he was told to, because the space felt necessary. He checked the fire, adjusted the vent, then sat by the window, watching the line where forest met sky. He thought of the way Lena had said, you can stay, the night before, and the way she had followed it with, that is not what I meant. Daniel did not chase the meaning. He let it remain unresolved. When Lena returned near dusk, snow clinging to her boots, she paused in the doorway. You did not go anywhere, she said again. No, Daniel replied. She studied him for a moment, then nodded, as if confirming a thought she had not shared. Dinner was quieter than usual, not uncomfortable, just deliberate. The dog shifted between them, sensing the change, settling closer to the fire. At one point, Daniel reached for the kettle at the same time Lena did. Their hands stopped inches apart, not touching, not retreating. Lena withdrew first. Go ahead, she said. Daniel shook his head. You. She poured the water, movement steady. Daniel waited. That moment lingered longer than it should have. After dinner, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows lightly. Lena checked the door latch once, then again. Daniel noticed the second check. You can sleep, he said quietly. I will stay up. Lena turned to face him fully. I did not ask you to. She said. I know, Daniel replied. She searched his face, looking for something he was not offering. Explanation. Assurance. Performance. She found none. Do not mistake stillness for obligation, she said. Daniel met her gaze. I do not. Another silence. This one heavier. Later, as the fire burned low, Lena sat near the hearth, knees drawn in, hands resting loosely. Daniel remained in the chair, posture open but contained. The bedroom door stood between them, unchanged. You do not cross lines, Lena said, not looking at him. No, Daniel replied. Most people do, she continued. I'm not most people, he said. She glanced up then, a flicker of something passing through her eyes. Not relief, not fear, recognition. The tension did not resolve that night. It settled instead, like snow accumulating without sound, reshaping the landscape slowly. Daniel lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind move through the trees. He understood something then. This was not distance meant to push him away. It was distance meant to see what he would do with it. And for the first time in his life, Daniel did not reach for control. He did not close the gap. He did not retreat. He stayed exactly where he was. If you're still listening, still here in this quiet moment, take another slow breath. Notice the space around you. Notice what you are not rushing to fill. Sometimes, healing does not arrive as comfort. Sometimes it arrives as a pause. Outside, the snow fell again. Inside, the silence held. And between them, something unspoken waited, patient and unresolved, asking only that neither of them move too soon. The next morning arrived softer than the ones before it. The wind had eased overnight, leaving the air still and dry. Snow lay undisturbed around the cabin, smoothing the world into quiet shapes. Daniel Frost woke to that stillness and recognized it as something earned, not given. He did not move right away. From the couch, he could hear Lena in the kitchen, not speaking, just existing. The sound of water poured carefully into the kettle. The faint scrape of a chair pulled back an inch, then set right again. No hitty, no tension layered on top of the morning. When Daniel stood, Lena glanced at him once, then returned to her task. Coffee is ready, she said, Not an invitation. Not a command. Information. Daniel nodded. Thank you. They sat at opposite sides of the table, steam rising between them. The dog lay under the table, head resting on his paws, tracking their movements with half-closed eyes. For the first time since the tension had settled, Lena spoke without edge. I'm heading into town later, she said. Just for supplies. Daniel paused, then asked, do you want company? Lena considered the question carefully. Not whether she wanted him there, whether it changed anything. You can come, she said, if you want. The conditional mattered. They left together mid-morning. The walk to town was quiet, the trail packed from prior storms. The temperature hovered near 22 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to keep conversation minimal. Perfect for thinking. Daniel walked slightly behind Lena, not because he was unsure, but because he understood the terrain was hers. When they reached the road, Lena slowed until they walked side by side. Town was small. A gas station, a general store, a post office with a faded flag that moved only when the wind told it to. Daniel did not scan the area like a man hiding. He moved like someone who did not expect to be recognized. Inside the store, Lena grabbed what she needed without browsing. Fuel, dry goods, medical tape. Daniel carried the basket when it grew heavy. No comment, no performance. At the counter, the clerk nodded at Lena, then glanced at Daniel. Friend of yours? He asked. Yes, Lena replied. Daniel felt the word land without weight. Not loaded, not strategic. Outside, Lena loaded supplies into her truck. Daniel handed her the last bag, then stepped back. You did not ask what I do, Daniel said, once the engine started. Lena looked at him. No, most people do, he added. I'm not most people, she said. He smiled faintly, not because it was clever, because it was true. On the drive back, the road stretched empty ahead of them, white on either side. Lena drove steadily. Daniel watched the landscape pass, letting the quiet do its work. At the cabin, they unloaded together. Lena stored the supplies with practiced efficiency. Daniel followed her lead, placing things where she indicated, not assuming. When everything was settled, Lena paused near the counter. There is something I need to say, she said. Daniel waited. I do not need help, she continued. I accept it when it is offered, but I do not need it. Daniel nodded. I understand. And, she added, meeting his eyes, I notice when someone respects that. Daniel did not respond immediately. He let the statement exist. I'm not here to take over, he said finally. I know, Lena replied. That was the shift. Not closeness that blurred lines. Not distance that hardened them. Something cleaner. In the afternoon, Daniel worked outside, while Lena organized inside. At one point, he slipped on ice again, catching himself on the railing. Lena watched from the window, hands still. You okay? She called out. Yes, Daniel answered. She returned to her task without waiting. Later, as dusk approached, Lena stepped onto the porch with 2 mugs of tea. She handed one to Daniel, then leaned against the railing beside him. Not touching, not withdrawing. The sky dimmed, pale blue fading into gray. You do not ask for permission to be useful, Lena said. But you also do not insist. Daniel watched the tree lean. Insistence makes people defensive. Yes, she agreed. It does. They stood like that for several minutes, sharing warmth without claiming it. When the cold deepened, Lena pushed off the railing. Dinner soon, she said. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight. The fire caught easily. Daniel sat where he always did. Lena moved through the space with the same quiet authority as before. Nothing was resolved, but something had aligned. Daniel understood now that trust here was not given in declarations. It arrived in increments. In the way Lena let him walk beside her instead of ahead or behind. In the way she named him a friend without explanation. In the way she stated her boundaries without asking him to manage them. And Lena understood something too. Daniel Frost was not trying to replace. He was learning how to stay without taking one. Outside, night settled gently over Alaska. Inside, the space between them narrowed by exactly as much as it needed to, and no more. For now, that was enough. The routine returned, but it no longer repeated itself the same way. Daniel Frost noticed the difference in small places first, and how Lena no longer paused when handing him tools. in how the dog chose to sleep closer to where Daniel sat instead of positioning himself squarely between them, in how mornings began with fewer adjustments and ended with fewer checks. The world around the cabin shifted too. Snow fell lighter now, not in sheets, but in quiet drifts that softened edges instead of erasing them. The temperature hovered near 25 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, cold enough to keep everything honest, warm enough to allow movement without urgency. Daniel took to walking the perimeter each morning, not as patrol, as orientation. He learned where the ground dipped after thaw, where the wind cut hardest, where the trees shielded sound. Lena watched from the window once, then returned to her book. That was the new rhythm. Observation without supervision. One afternoon, while Lena sorted supplies in the shed, Daniel heard the sound before he saw the problem. A low mechanical whine, uneven, then a pause. Not the generator. The truck. He stepped toward the road and found it half buried in drifted snow, one wheel spinning uselessly when Lena tried to reverse. She shut the engine off immediately, preventing damage. "I misjudged the drift," she said calmly. Daniel nodded. "It happens." He did not rush forward. He did not take control. He waited until she stepped out and handed him the shovel without comment. They worked together. Daniel cleared snow from the tires methodically, testing the ground with his boot, adjusting angle. Lena packed gravel beneath the tread. No raised voices. No instructions shouted over the wind. Just short statements passed back and forth. "More here. Good. Try now." The truck rolled free with a low crunch, then settled. Lena turned off the engine and sat for a moment. "Thank you," she said. Daniel wiped snow from his gloves. "You would have handled it." "Yes," she replied. "Faster with two." That was the rescue. No hedo, no debt created, just capacity added quietly. Back inside, the cabin resumed its warmth. Lena hung wet gear to dry. Daniel stacked the shovel where it belonged. The dog shook snow from his coat and lay down near the stove, satisfied. Later that evening, as Daniel poured tea, something small slipped from his pocket and clinked softly against the table. A slim metal object. Not a phone, not a key, a card worn at the edges. Lena noticed it and looked away immediately. Daniel picked it up, turning it once in his fingers before sliding it back into his pocket. He did not explain. She did not ask. But the moment lingered. That was the past arriving quietly. The next day, routine repeated, but differently again. Daniel repaired a loose hinge on the cabin door, pausing midway to test alignment instead of finishing by habit. Lena adjusted the firewood stack he had built earlier, rearranging pieces slightly for airflow. Neither commented on the other's changes. At lunch, Lena set an extra bowl out without explanation. Daniel noticed. "Someone coming?" he asked. "Possibly," she said. He did not ask who. No one arrived. That night, the wind returned briefly, rattling the trees hard enough to remind them of what Alaska could still do. Daniel stayed up later than usual, reading by lantern light. Lena slept early. At some point, Daniel heard movement near the porch. Not footsteps. An animal. He stood slowly, moving toward the door without sound. Outside, a moose stood at the edge of the clearing, massive and still, breath visible in the cold. Daniel froze. He did not step forward. He did not reach for anything. The animal regarded him for a long moment, then turned and moved back into the trees. Daniel closed the door carefully. In the morning, Lena noticed the fresh tracks. "You saw him," she said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "You did not wake me." No, she met his eyes. Good. The days that followed blended into each other in a way that felt earned. Work repeated, but its meaning shifted. Daniel no longer looked for tasks automatically. Sometimes he sat with Lena by the window, both of them reading separate books, silence shared rather than managed. One afternoon, Lena reached across the table and slid a folded note toward him. "What is this?" Daniel asked. "Trail schedule," she said. "For storms." He unfolded it carefully. Her handwriting was precise, economical. "You trust me with this," he said. "Yes." No explanation. That evening, as they prepared dinner, the radio crackled briefly with static, then a voice. A weather update. Nothing urgent. Daniel listened without comment, then turned it off. Lena watched him. "You know how to disappear," she said. Daniel considered the statement. "I know how to become quiet." She nodded. "There's a difference." They ate without speaking after that. The routine held, but it was no longer neutral. It carried weight now. Each repetition reinforced something neither of them named. The cabin felt less like a shelter and more like a shared structure. Not because ownership shifted, but because presence did. If you're listening to this and feel the days blur together, consider this. Repetition does not mean stagnation. Sometimes it means safety deepening slowly, quietly, without announcement. Outside, Alaska continued to move on its own terms. Inside, two lives adjusted around each other without force. And somewhere beneath the steady rhythm, a question remained. What happens when the past arrives, not as a storm, but as a whisper? Neither Daniel nor Lena answered it yet. They did not need to. For now, it was enough to notice that the routine, once a refuge, had become something else entirely. The consequence arrived quietly, the way most real ones did. It came on a gray morning when the sky sat low and heavy, the kind that flattened sound and shortened distance. Daniel Frost had been outside since dawn, clearing a new line where drifting snow had begun to creep too close to the generator shed. He worked steadily, breath slow, movements precise, stopping before fatigue turned useful effort into risk. When he came back inside, Lena was standing by the table, her coat already on. "I'm heading into town," she said. The weather radio picked up something inconsistent. Daniel nodded. "Do you want company?" Lena hesitated, just long enough to matter. "No," she said. "Not today." Daniel accepted the answer without comment. He poured her a cup of coffee, slid it across the table, then stepped back. She paused, watching him for a moment. "You do not need to stay," she said. "You could go." Daniel met her eyes. "I know." She nodded once, took the coffee, and left. The cabin felt larger after that. Not empty, just wider. Daniel noticed the space between objects more, the distance from the stove to the window, from the couch to the door. He filled none of it. He spent the morning reading, then repairing a loose latch on the back window. When that was done, he stopped. He did not look for more. By early afternoon, the weather shifted. Wind picked up without warning, dragging snow sideways across the clearing. Visibility dropped fast. Daniel turned the radio on, listening carefully, then turned it off again. Lena did not return when he expected her to. He did not panic. He did not rush out after her. He waited. When the sound of the truck finally cut through the wind, Daniel stepped onto the porch. Lena pulled into the clearing slower than usual, tires slipping once before catching. Daniel walked toward the driver's side, stopping several feet back. "You were late," he said. "Yes," Lena replied. She shut the engine off and stayed seated for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. Daniel waited. "There was a detour," she said finally, and a question. He had not asked what kind. Inside, Lena set her keys on the hook and removed her coat. Her movements were precise, but there was an edge to them now, subtle but present. At the table, she poured water instead of tea. "You were asked about me," Daniel said. It was not a guess. "Yes," Lena replied. "At the store." Daniel nodded once. "And they did not recognize you," she said. "But they noticed." He accepted that. "They asked if you were staying," she continued. "And what did you say?" "I said yes." Daniel felt the word settle. Not heavy, not light. "They asked why," Lena added. "And what did you say then?" "I said it was temporary." Daniel did not react. That was the consequence. The afternoon passed quietly, but the alignment had shifted again. Lena moved through the cabin with a touch more distance. Daniel noticed and adjusted, giving her space without retreating completely. At dinner, they sat across from each other, bowls steaming between them. "You could have said more," Daniel said. Lena looked up. "I could have, but you did not." "No," he nodded. "Thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For choosing your comfort," he replied, "over my convenience." She studied him, expression unreadable. "This is what I meant," Lena said, "when I said actions have weight." Daniel met her gaze. "I know." Later that night, the wind returned stronger this time. Lena checked the door latch twice. Daniel noticed, but did not comment. When the lights flickered briefly, Lena stiffened. Daniel stood, not moving toward her, just positioning himself closer to the door. "It is nothing," she said. "I know," he replied. The lights held. As the fire burned lower, Lena spoke again. "If you stay," she said carefully, "questions will follow." Daniel considered that. "I'm not hiding from questions," he said. "I'm choosing when to answer." "That choice affects me," Lena replied. "Yes," Daniel said. "That is the price." She nodded slowly. That was the shift. Not conflict, not resolution, just clarity. The night passed with little sleep for either of them. In the early hours, Daniel sat by the window, watching snow move through the dark. Lena lay awake in her room, listening to the wind test the walls. In the morning, Lena emerged first. "There is something else," she said. Daniel waited. "If you stay longer," she continued, "you will need to decide how visible you are willing to be. Not to me, to the world around us." Daniel nodded. "And if I choose not to be, then I will need to decide," she said, "how much of that I can hold." They stood there, the space between them quiet but charged. No ultimatum, no demand, just two people acknowledging the cost of proximity. Outside, the snow eased again, leaving the clearing pale and still. Inside, the cabin held its warmth, but something new had been introduced. Consequence did not arrive as punishment. It arrived as choice, and neither of them was ready to make the final one yet. Daniel Frost did not arrive at the realization all at once. It came the way Alaska taught most lessons, slowly, without warning, and without asking whether he was ready. The morning after their conversation, the cabin felt unchanged. The fire lit easily. The kettle warmed at the same pace. Snow rested along the windowsills as if it had always been there. Yet something in Daniel had shifted, subtle enough to be missed if he had not learned how to notice small movements inside himself. He did not reach for a task immediately. Instead, he stood by the window, watching Lena move outside. She was clearing a narrow path toward the shed, shovel cutting clean lines through fresh snow. Her movements were efficient, practiced, but unhurried. She did not look back to see if he was watching. That mattered. Daniel realized then that what unsettled him was not the possibility of being seen. It was the possibility of being considered, not evaluated, not admired, considered. He had lived most of his life in rooms where attention was currency, where presence created reaction, where every decision left a wake. Here, his choices did not ripple outward unless he allowed them to. And Lena had made something clear the night before. She was willing to hold space. She was not willing to absorb consequences that were not hers. Daniel stepped away from the window and poured coffee. He sat at the table alone, hands wrapped around the mug, letting the heat travel slowly into his palms. He did not open a book. He did not turn on the radio. He thought, not about his past in detail, not about names or numbers or decisions already made. He thought about capacity, about the difference between power that filled a room and power that changed a room simply by being present. Lena came back inside a few minutes later, snow clinging to the hem of her coat. She hung it, removed her gloves, and poured herself water. "You do not need to adjust your schedule for me," she said, without looking at him. "I am not," Daniel replied. She glanced at him then, measuring his tone more than his words. "Good," she said. They ate breakfast quietly. No tension layered on top of it now. Just awareness. Daniel noticed how Lena kept her movements contained, how she left space even when the cabin allowed closeness. She was not retreating. She was maintaining. After breakfast, Daniel stood and reached for his coat. "I'm going for a walk," he said. Lena nodded. "Trail is stable. I will not go far." "I know," she replied. He stepped outside into the cold, breath turning white immediately. The temperature sat near 18 degrees Fahrenheit, sharp enough to keep the body honest. Daniel followed the familiar path, boots finding their place without thought. As he walked, he noticed what he had not before. The way the wind shifted depending on the bend. The way sound dropped out completely under certain trees. The way his own breathing adjusted without instruction. He realized then that the life he had stepped away from had not been loud. It had been demanding a reaction, of response, of explanation. Here, Nothing asked him to perform. And that meant something else entirely was being asked of him. Choice. Daniel stopped near the edge of the clearing and stood still. If you're listening right now, consider doing the same, wherever you are. Pause. Feel where you are standing. Notice what is not pulling at you in this moment. Daniel understood that staying here without deciding how visible he was willing to be would eventually ask Lena to carry uncertainty that did not belong to her. And leaving without acknowledgement would cost him something he was only just beginning to value. Neither option was wrong, but only one was honest. When he returned to the cabin, Lena was organizing supplies near the shelves. She looked up briefly, then back down. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel replied. She accepted that answer. He moved through the rest of the day with intention, not urgency. He repaired nothing that did not need repairing. He did not create usefulness where none was required. When Lena asked him to hold a ladder while she adjusted a light outside, he did. When she finished, he stepped away. In the late afternoon, as the light faded early again, Lena set 2 mugs on the table. "You are quieter today," she said. Daniel considered that. "I'm listening." To what? He met her eyes. To what staying actually means. She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded. "I respect that," she said. "Whatever you decide." There was no pressure in her voice. No hope. No withdrawal. Respect. That was the quietest gift she could have offered. They sat together as night settled in, the fire burning low, the dog sleeping between them. The bedroom door remained closed, unchanged. The boundary held, steady and intact. Daniel did not need to cross it to understand something essential. This place had not healed him. It had given him enough stillness to hear himself clearly for the first time in years. And Lena, without asking, without guiding, without fixing, had allowed that clarity to arrive. If you are still listening, consider this gently. Sometimes the most profound change happens when no one asks you to change at all. Outside, Alaska held its silence. Inside, 2 people sat with a truth that did not need to be spoken yet. Daniel did not know what he would choose. But for the first time, he knew the choice would be his. And Lena, quietly, without stepping closer or further away, honored that completely. The routine returned the way it always did. Quietly, without announcement. Morning light pressed against the cabin windows, pale and steady. Snow rested where it had the night before, unbothered by human thought or intention. Alaska remained exactly as it was. Cold outside, warm inside, unmoved. Daniel Frost woke before the kettle whistled, before the dog shifted, before the world asked anything of him. He sat up on the couch and waited for his breath to settle. It did not take long anymore. He dressed in the same layers, folded the blanket the same way, and stepped outside to greet the cold. The temperature hovered near 20 degrees Fahrenheit, sharp enough to wake the body without punishing it. He shoveled the path as he always did, clearing only what needed clearing, stopping when the line was clean. Inside, Lena moved through the kitchen with the same economy as before. Water measured, coffee ground slowly, 2 mugs placed where they always landed. Nothing new, everything different. They ate together without filling the air. Daniel noticed the small changes. How Lena no longer paused before speaking, but still chose her words carefully. How she did not watch him as closely, not because she trusted him less, but because she no longer needed to assess him. Trust, he realized, did not require constant verification. After breakfast, Lena pulled on her coat. "I'm heading out to check the traps," she said. Daniel nodded. "I will be here." Not an offer, not a promise, a statement of alignment. She accepted it without comment. The day unfolded along familiar lines. Daniel split wood, but not excessively. He repaired nothing that did not ask to be repaired. When the fire needed tending, he tended it. When it did not, he let it burn low. Lena returned mid-afternoon, snow dusting her boots. She set her pack down and poured water without rushing. "Anything new?" she asked. "No," Daniel replied. She smiled faintly, not because nothing had happened, because that was enough. In the late afternoon, they sat by the window again, each with a book, silence shared without management. The dog slept between them, shifting once, then settling deeper. Daniel realized that the quiet now felt different. It no longer pressed in from the outside. It moved with them, shaped by their presence rather than imposed upon it. As evening approached, Lena began preparing dinner. Daniel joined her at the counter, chopping vegetables with the same steady rhythm. Their hands moved close, but did not touch. There was no hesitation in the space between them. Dinner passed calmly. Soup, bread, enough. Afterward, Lena checked the door latch once, not twice. Daniel noticed and said nothing. The fire caught easily, flames steady and low. Daniel sat back, hands resting loosely, eyes on the movement of light against the walls. Lena settled in her chair, legs tucked beneath her, posture relaxed. The bedroom door remained closed. It no longer felt like a test. It felt like a given. You are still here, Lena said, not looking at him. Yes, Daniel replied. She nodded. I thought you would be. He considered that. So did I. There was no need to explain what had been considered or what had been set aside. The choice lived in action now, not language. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, no longer probing, just passing through. Snow fell lightly, softening sound rather than silencing it. If you're listening to this, notice how routine can return without becoming repetition. How the same actions can hold different weight once something inside has shifted. Daniel understood that he had not found a new life here. He had found a truer rhythm. Lena understood that she had not needed to change her boundaries to allow closeness. She had simply allowed space for choice. They sat together until the fire burned low, neither reaching to add wood immediately. When Daniel finally stood, he added one piece, just enough. The light held. Alaska remained quiet. But the man inside the cabin was no longer listening for what he might lose. He was listening for what he was willing to keep. And the woman beside him, without stepping closer or pulling away, let that choice stand. The routine returned. Changed. Night arrived the way it always did in Alaska. Without ceremony. Without asking. The sky dimmed slowly, light draining from the snow until the clearing became a soft field of gray and shadow. The temperature dropped to just under 15 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to sharpen sound, not harsh enough to demand action. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low and steady. Daniel Frost sat on the couch, blanket folded beside him instead of over him now. He no longer needed it immediately. The dog lay stretched near the hearth, breathing slow, content. Across the room, Lena Harper finished rinsing a mug and set it upside down on the towel. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The quiet between them no longer felt like something to manage. It was simply there, like the walls, like the heat, like the trust that had settled without being named. Lena checked the door latch once. Habit. She paused, then stepped back. Daniel noticed. He did not comment. She turned toward him. Weather should hold tomorrow. Daniel nodded. Good. That was all. They sat together as the firelight moved across the room, shadows stretching and shrinking with each shift of flame. The bedroom door remained closed, unchanged. Not because it needed guarding, because it had never needed to be opened. At some point, Lena reached for a book and sat down in her chair, legs tucked beneath her. Daniel leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Not testing, just passing through. If you're listening now, allow yourself to settle into this moment with them. Let your breathing slow. Let the day release its hold. There is nothing you need to solve here. The night deepened. Daniel realized he was no longer counting time, no longer measuring how long he had stayed or how long he might remain. The question that had once pressed at the edges of his thoughts had softened. Not answered. Softened. Lena turned a page quietly. You can take the bed tonight, she said, without looking up. Daniel opened his eyes. The couch is fine, he replied. She nodded. All right. No insistence. No test. She set the book aside and stood, stretching once before heading toward her room. She stopped at the doorway, resting her hand briefly against the frame. Good night, Daniel, she said. Good night, Lena, he replied. The door closed gently behind her. Daniel lay back and watched the fire burn lower, embers glowing softly. He did not reach to add wood right away. He let the warmth fade to the level that matched the room. Outside, snow began to fall again, light and steady, softening the world without erasing it. He thought about visibility, about choice, about what it meant to stay not because there was nowhere else to go, but because staying was an honest option. Lena lay awake for a few minutes in her room, listening to the familiar sounds of the cabin settling. She did not wonder what Daniel was thinking. She trusted that whatever it was, it belonged to him. That trust, she knew, was the difference. The fire dimmed to embers. Daniel stood once more and added a single piece of wood, just enough to carry the heat through the night. He returned to the couch and closed his eyes. Alaska held its quiet. Nothing had been resolved. Nothing had been promised. Nothing had been taken. Yet something essential had arrived. If you return to this place again, to this cabin, to this quiet, you may find it exactly the same. Or you may notice what has changed. That is how real healing works. Not with endings, not with declarations, but with nights that feel safe enough to rest in. The snow continued to fall. The fire held. And somewhere between the cold outside and the warmth within, a story remained open, waiting, patient, unforced, for the next moment when both were ready to listen again. Sleep well. We will be here when you return.